Well, we've got 300 people who have joined us for the webinar, so I will start now. It's 3:03 in the afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning to those that are joining us from Europe. Today's webinar is a joint effort between the Malaysian Palm Oil Council, the European Forest Institute, and the European Commission. We are here to discuss the preparations, challenges, and solutions for EU operators and Malaysian exporters in meeting the EU deforestation regulation, or in short, EUDR. My name is Belvinder. I am the CEO of the Malaysian Palm Oil Council and am pleased to be moderating the session today. As many of you know, we are now only 5 months away from EUDR compliance deadline. By December 30th, 2024, EU operators and traders must comply with the new rules, ensuring that products entering the EU are deforestation-free and produced according to relevant local laws. We know the EUDR has been widely debated and also criticized by exporting countries of some of the affected commodities, including rubber, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, and soya, most of which are produced in developing countries like Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and even Latin America. Malaysian exporters to the EU have invested significant financial and technical resources to meet these requirements, especially regarding geolocation, legality information, supply chain traceability. However, many small farmers in the palm oil supply chain face difficulties meeting these requirements and risk being excluded from the supply chain itself. We had extensively discussed these challenges during the MPOC's EUDR webinar in May. I think some of you may have joined us then. And for those who may have missed it, the recording and presentations are available on the MPOC website. So despite these efforts, several challenges remain, particularly in providing the necessary due diligence information due to the complexities of the palm oil supply chain and the lack of clear guidance from the EU and the respective authorities. So both the EU operators and Malaysian exporters are in a difficult position, with only a few months left to prepare for EUDR implementation. It is crucial for us all to find clear, practical, and cost-efficient measures to ensure that EUDR-compliant Malaysian palm oil can be shipped on time, preventing any supply chain disruptions in the EU. Failure to do so will affect not only Malaysian stakeholders, but also our European businesses and consumers. So to address these urgent issues, MPOC, EFI, and the European Commission have organized this webinar to enhance understanding of the EUDR compliance requirements. We will explore the preparations needed to ensure that palm oil products and their derivatives exported to the EU after December 30th, 2024 are EUDR compliant. So what are the key challenges that remain? And will supply chains need to restructure to exclude maybe some of the producers or even the smallholders? Additionally, we hope to discuss alternatives, practical solutions for the European Commission's consideration. More importantly, we hope today's discussion will lead to feasible, cost-efficient, and practical solutions supported by the MSPO certification scheme. As you know, the MSPO offers a government-backed guarantee of no deforestation with a cutoff date of 2019 compared to 2020 under EUDR. It provides an assurance for EUDR legality and due diligence requirements, forming the basis for risk assessment by importers using a verification system, which will be the focus of EFI's presentation. So today's webinar aims to gather insights into EUDR-related preparations from the EU and its member states, EU operators, and Malaysian palm oil exporters. Our four speakers who will lead these discussions are Dr. Jossel Murray from the European Forest Institute, Mr. Khoo Kok Peng, he is from Kuala Lumpur, Kampong Berhad, Daphne Hamatiman, she's from Wilma International, and Miss Henry Fergerman. She's the climate action and ICT person from the EU delegation to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam. Each speaker is given 15 minutes to present your views, with an additional 5 minutes if needed. And after all the presentations, we will have a Q&A session. Each speaker is given 15 minutes to present your views, with an additional 5 minutes if needed. And after all the presentations, we will have a Q&A session. We encourage you to submit your questions. For participants, please submit your questions for the speakers throughout the event using the Q&A tab, not in the chat tab, please, in the Q&A tab. And please indicate to whom your questions are addressed, and I will then direct them to the appropriate speakers during the Q&A session. So let me start by introducing our first speaker for today. We have Jocelyn Murray. She is a technical expert from the European Forest Institute KAMI project. She holds a PhD in forestry and has over 22 years of experience with organizations such as FAO, C4 WWF, and various European universities on forest governance, timber and agriculture supply chains, and forest conservation across Asia Pacific and Latin America. Jocelyn will speak on EUDR information needs and information available from MSPO certification, sharing EFI KAMI's findings on MSPO's readiness for EUDR and the proposed improvements. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Jocelyn Murray. Jocelyn, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Bell, for the kind introduction. And it gives me great honor to kick off the webinar today with my presentation on the EUDR information needs and information available from MSPO certification. As we all know, certification would be a useful tool for EU operators to carry out due diligence. And today we will look at the kind of information that we can get from MSPO certification and how MSPO certification can better align with the EUDR requirements. Just very quickly about the EFI KAMI project. The project is an EU-funded project that aims to reinforce EU-Malaysia and EU-Indonesia's partnership by supporting national processes and international dialogue on sustainable natural resource use with a focus on palm oil. I'd also like to take you to a little bit of a background on this, the work that I'm presenting to you. This findings from today comes from the EUDR MSPO gap analysis that was conducted jointly with the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil Certification, MSPO. This assessment was carried out for the most of towards the end of 2023, and we are at the stage where we are now ready to also share the findings and get feedback from industry. So it was at the EU-Malaysia and Indonesia ad hoc joint task force on the EUDR that we received the mandate to carry out this analysis, and we also presented key findings at the second joint task force meeting at in February this year. So the objective of this analysis or assessment is to identify areas where EUDR and MSPO information needs are aligned and where information gaps exist. And then we also, together with MSPO, are thinking of solutions and ways to better align MSPO certification with the EUDR requirements. So here you can see that the assessment focuses on MSPO standards as well as guidance documents. It looks specifically at Articles 2, 3, 9, and 10 of the EUDR. It looks at MSPO 2022 standard series that will come into full implementation in January 2025. And it also looks at interventions in the pipeline by MSPO, but also by the palm oil sector in Malaysia. I'm sure by now all of us are familiar with the EUDR requirements, but let's just very quickly go through this because this is how the findings are structured. So as we are aware, from the end of this year, 31st December 2024, palm oil coffee, cocoa, soy, cattle, timber, and rubber entering the EU will have to be both deforestation free, and this is following the FAO EUDR forest definition, and legal. And this is produced in accordance with the relevant legislation of the country of production. And products will need to be covered by a due diligence statement. So now we move into the findings. So this is the information needs in the EUDR with regards to deforestation free. So deforestation free in the EUDR is defined as commodities that were produced on land that has not been subjected to deforestation after the cutoff date of 31st December 2020. And forest here is defined as land spanning more than half a hectare with trees higher than 5 meters with a canopy cover of more than 10%, or trees that are able to reach that threshold in situ, and this exclude land that is predominantly under agricultural urban use. The MSPO standard also contains information in relation to deforestation free, and you can find this under Principle 1, Criteria 2, where new planting cannot be in areas that convert natural forests, protected areas, and high conservation value areas. And the cutoff date for MSPO is 31st December 2019. Here, the MSPO defines natural forest as primary forest, regenerated second growth forest, managed natural forest, and partially degraded forest. So you can see there are relevance in the kind of information that the EUDR requires and the information that's available from MSPO certification. However, because that there is a difference in definition, this still means that MSPO certified palm oil entering the EU will still need to be verified for deforestation-free production by EU operators, because it could be that how MSPO defines forest would not qualify for areas that is considered deforestation-free under the EUDR. Another information gap is that for the period of which the cutoff date for MSPO applies until when the 2022 standard comes in full implementation, there will be no verification of deforestation free. So this information will not be available for that period. So now we'll see how MSPO could align with the deforestation free information of the EUDR. So firstly, so these solutions are developed in collaboration with MSPO. So these are the options that they are considering. And so the first one is to align forest definition in the HCV guidance with the EUDR FAO definition. This means that before any new planting, HCV assessments will need to be carried out. And when these HCV assessments are carried out, they would need to identify areas that would be considered forest under the EUDR FAO definition. So these areas will not be cleared. Another option is to identify and publish information on plantations that are deforestation free. So there are large areas of plantations in Malaysia that was established prior to 31st December 2020 or even 2019, which is the cutoff date of MSPO. And so these areas would be considered deforestation free according to the EUDR, and identifying these areas will be very useful for operators in Europe when carrying out the due diligence. Another solution that was considered is to explore aligning the MSPO definition with the FAO EUDR definition. So the usefulness of this is, like I mentioned earlier, then MSPO certified products will not need to be, will be sharing the same definition as the EUDR definition, and will make verification by EU operators a little bit easier moving forward. And so the second information need in the EUDR is with regards to legality information. So here, the EUDR defines legality as laws that are applicable in the country of production, so Malaysia, concerning the legal status of area of production. And so there are 8 criteria for legality under the EUDR, and this is listed in the presentation. And we'll see that MSPO 2022 standards contain a lot of relevant information regarding the legal status of the plantations in Malaysia, and coupled with the requirements for MPOB license, and I think there is a very strong legal requirement that are in place. But also very important to highlight that the MSPO 2022 standards also contains strengthened requirements on environmental protection. So with the introduction of the HCB concept, strengthened traceability requirements with the inclusion of dealers and the introduction of a new standard for dealers, and also improve indicators on labor rights with the adoption of concepts such as child rights, forced labor, ethical conducts. So there are a lot of information that will be very valuable for due diligence by EU operators from MSPO certification. I wouldn't call this a gap per se, but I think one aspect that could, additional information, if made available, could really strengthen due diligence checks by operators. And this is to identify the laws and information that is, laws and regulations following international conventions that have legal force in the country, in Malaysia. So here is something that MSPO is already looking into, and we know that they will develop a list of relevant laws and international convention which has been ratified by Malaysia, which holds legal force. And this, I think, would already help operators when they carry out due diligence. And the third key information required under the EUDR is with regards to geolocation. So the EUDR defines geolocation as 1 latitude and 1 longitude point using at least 6 decimal digits. And for plots that are larger than 4 hectares, polygons with sufficient latitude and longitude points to describe the perimeter of each plot of land. And so we found that in MSPO certification, there are requirements for certification bodies to collect and report on plantation locations. So this includes GPS coordinates of all plantations, as well as boundary maps. And this information is can be found in MSPO Trace, as well as public summary of audit reports. However, this information currently is not in line with what the EUDR requires, because polygon information that is for plots of land larger than 4 hectares is currently not collected. And while boundary maps are included in the audit reports, it is currently not in a format that is in line with the EUDR requirement, which is sufficient number of coordinates to describe the area of production. So here you can see that also information that is in the audit reports currently cannot be transferred along the supply chain, as it would be useful for traceability. So how can we align MSPO? And this is something that, as I mentioned earlier, something that is being considered by MSPO, is to upgrade MSPO Trace, of course, so that the geolocation information that is currently being collected by CBs could be in a format that could be transferred along the supply chain. And this would be in line with EUDR requirements. So for plots that are larger than 4 hectares, there should be sufficient number of coordinates collected for each plantation. And we are also aware that MSPO is exploring options for interoperability between MSPO Trace and the MPOB's GeoPalm portal. For those of you who are not familiar with the GeoPalm portal, it is an MPOB's initiative to map out all the plantation in Malaysia. And this would be polygon information that would be very useful for EUDR. And rather than replicating this initiative or work that is taking a lot of effort over the last 3 years, is for MSPO to find a way to link between MSPO Trace and this GeoPalm portal. Lastly is with regards to traceability information. While traceability is not explicitly required, or information systems are not explicitly required in the EUDR, traceability does provide a means to connect geolocation information to the plot of land, and also in verifying or facilitating the verification of deforestation-free production. And here we know that MSPO contains requirements for traceability. So certified entities are required to develop a system to be able to trace products along the supply chain. And they have two supply chain models that they can use. So this is the segregated supply chain model or the mass balance supply chain model. One allows for traceability of 100% certified palm oil, and the one allows for the mixing, and the mass balance model allows for the mixing of certified and uncertified palm oil. And MSPO also has MSPO Trace, which, and under MSPO Trace, there is a traceability module where all Part 4 certified entities, so these are the mills, refineries, and dealers, will have to submit supply chain information. So these are buyer and seller information, as well as transaction information into MSPO Trace module. We found a few areas where MSPO traceability information could be better aligned with EUDR. And for one, palm oil produced by smallholders that are sold through dealers. And I think a lot of you are aware of the dealer, the role of dealers in smallholder supply chains. And until the dealer standard come into full implementation, it will be still rather difficult or impossible almost to trace back to the smallholders who sell through dealers. Another one is with regards to the mass balance supply chain model. Products certified under the mass balance model cannot be traced back to the plot of land because geolocation information is not collected for the uncertified component. And then there is the mixing between the certified and uncertified, so it will not be possible to trace back to the plot of land. MSPO Trace, traceability platform, currently depends on sales announcements. So unless the sales announcement system is used throughout the system or for EU operators buying from Malaysia, then there is no, it's not possible to trace back using MSPO Trace. And also, right now, MSPO Trace allows for reporting of FFP on a monthly basis. For example, so this also would make traceability not possible for such situations. And as I mentioned earlier, that there is the currently geolocation information is stored in a way that cannot be transferred along the supply chain. And how do we align the traceability information? I think this is quite a big priority for MSPO, and they are considering different ways in which the MSPO trace can be upgraded in order to allow full traceability to the plot of land. And one example of that is being explored by MSPO is to allow EU operators to register in MSPO Trace as a user, for them to be able to access their immediate supply chain information. Another option is for the segregated supply chain model to be used in the short term for EU markets, because those products that are certified under this model would allow full traceability to the plot of land. And one very, very important component to ensure that smallholders are not left behind is through the acceleration of certification of dealers to allow even products that are sold by independent smallholders to be included in EU supply chains after 31st December 2024. So I would end there with a big thank you for your attention. And as you can see, there is a wealth of information that is available. And our work together with MSPO has been really now looking at how to implement some of these solutions. And later in the Q&A session, my colleague from MSPO, Mr. Yong, will be joining us to also share and take some questions from all of you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ms. Bao.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Yes, you do have a number of questions. I see 7 questions posed by the participants. So be prepared for that. But just let me summarize what Jocelyn has mentioned in the presentation. What we gather is that MSPO's forest and deforestation definitions, they differ from EUDR's. MSPO is now looking at aligning its forest definition with FAO or EUDR definitions, and there are already plans to publish information on plantations established before December 31st, 2020 as deforestation free. And in terms of human rights, MSPO will include a list of relevant international conventions that are already ratified by Malaysia And to address the very important point of missing polygon information that all of us have been discussing and talking about, which has been a very crucial piece of information that is much needed for EUDR compliance for plots above 4 hectares. MSPO trace will be upgraded to include the geolocation information, and challenges in tracing palm oil to the plot of land, especially with smallholders and dealers. You mentioned MSPO trace will be upgraded for full traceability to the plot of land for EU-bound products. So the MSPO segregated supply chain model will be used for the EU market, and certification of dealers in supply chain selling to the EU will be expedited. Now, so basically what we see here, or what we hear from what Jocelyn has presented, Malaysia is already updating its certification scheme for exporters to the EU to meet the EUDR requirements. And we all know no standard is perfect. There will always be areas for improvement. Same for MSPO, it's going to happen over time. However, the question remains, when will the EU acknowledge or even endorse MSPO as a valid pathway for EUDR compliance? We hope to hear this from our colleague and friend from the EU Commission later. So let us now go to our second speaker. We want to hear now the viewpoint from an exporter. Our second speaker is Khoo Kok Peng. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer of KL Kapong Berhad. He oversees KLK's sustainability strategy, risk communications, investor relations, corporate responsibility, and government relations functions. That's a huge task in your hands, Khoo. He has a diverse background, including roles as Group Chief Strategy Officer at Green Packet previously. He was an Executive Vice President and partner at Pemandu Associates. He has had vast experience, I know, from the palm oil sector, and he was also the Managing Director at Fleshman Hillat Southeast Asia. He holds a bachelor's law degree from the University of London and a certificate of legal practice. So Khoo will discuss EUDR from the perspective of a Malaysian exporter. He will share the challenges faced by KLK particularly, but also many other exporters in meeting the EUDR requirements. This includes issues with the definitions, the risk assessments, and also the supply chain complexities. Khoo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Belle, for the kind introduction. And I think it is correct to say that while I'm presenting on behalf of Kuala Lumpur Kapong, I think the challenges and the concerns that we have is reflected across all our peers who are exporting to Europe. So what I intend to do today is that I will give a brief background in terms of palm and its sustainability. Highlight some of the challenges that we're currently facing with regards to EUDR compliance, and a summary of what are the key takeaways in terms of what exporters feel about the EUDR requirement. Okay, so I think palm is one of those commodity that has come a long way with regards to sustainability. As most of us would know, the palm industry has been involved through the RSPO on sustainability since 2004, and that has been the predominant multi-stakeholder organization that has been fronting the sustainability movement for the palm industry. There is also fair trade, which is more industry agnostic, that can be used to cover palm, but I think in the main, it is RSPO that has been flying the flag. What happened subsequently also is that the international sustainability and carbon certification also came into play predominantly for the biofuel space. And then the national certifications, first the ISPO and later on the MSPO, all came into play. And through this journey, also the NDP policy adaptation came about sometime around 2013-14. If we look at palm, really oil palm is superior in terms of use compared to other vegetable oils. And it has a very low carbon footprint or land use footprint. Out of the 5 billion hectare of land that is used for agriculture, pasture takes up almost 70%. of the land use, with the remaining 30% being used for other arable crops. And that is about 1.55 billion hectares, out of which palm only takes up 24 million hectares, which is 0.5% of global agricultural land use. However, it produces 35% of the world's oil and fat output. So it really punches above its weight in terms of using very little land, but producing a lot that contributes towards issues like maintaining food security. And if you look at the yield per hectare, you can very clearly see that even using the average palm yield, which is at 3.6, it is multiple fold of what the other soft oils can produce. And if you look at the industry palm leaders, they are at about 6.4 tons per hectare. And so if we were to replace palm oil with other edible oils, it will require 5 to 7 times more land, or equivalent to as much as 168 million hectares more if you were to stop using palm. In terms of deforestation, unfortunately, this is an issue that has plagued the industry for a long time. And it is indeed true, and I'm sure the other presentations will show this, that there were deforestation in the early days of palm development, particularly between the year 2000 and perhaps 2022. But what you can see from this chart is in the last couple of years, the deforestation caused by palm cultivation has been declining very rapidly. In fact, in Malaysia, just in the last 3 years, we have achieved negative deforested area. The planted area for palm has actually gone backwards, not forward. And the Indonesian, on the other hand, has seen the deforestation area decline very significantly. Now, if you compare that to soy, as an example, soy out of Brazil, deforestation due to soy planting remains very significant. And just in the last 3 years, there's 6 million hectares that has been deforested. So it begets the question of what deforestation are we talking about as far as the palm oil industry is concerned. Coming into the responsibility of an exporter with regards to EUDR, these are the 7 steps that we have discovered that we need to go through. And in fact, we ourselves as an exporter is going through. And we will have to do, among others, interpret the requirements. And this includes us obtaining legal opinions or consultant opinions, and then finding alignment across the industry peers in terms of exactly what the requirement is. We also had to engage with the supplier chain in a far more extensive way to promote awareness. I think Jocelyn mentioned in our private conversation earlier that for a lot of people, even up to recently, they have heard only about EUDR for the very first time. And that is certainly very true for our supply chain. In addition to that, informing them about what EUDR is not sufficient. We will also have to seek their consent to obtain data and documents, and that is not a simple task. Thirdly, we have to execute a due diligence where we have to compile and analyze the supply chain data and then assess and mitigate the supply chain risks. And this is done by using third-party services where we do cross-mapping on the land to see whether we could verify it to be deforestation-free after the cutoff date. We also have to establish a data management system. In fact, in our case, we launched this development a couple of months ago, and we are at the beta stage. But it requires resources in terms of time and financials and experts to put together a DMS that can be connected to the EU portal, because this is essential for us to organize and then to share and to disclose the data to the EU authorities. The 5th step is we need to plan for facility compliance. And I think Joso mentioned about using MSPO segregated as a means of addressing the issue. And I think what we have found out quite clearly is that there is no substitute to segregation. Mass balance, whether it is MSPO or RSPO, just simply do not meet the requirement. And when you talk about segregation, you're talking about segregation at the kernel crushing plant, at the refinery, at the various oleo plants in which these volumes are flowing through. And it will have to include exercises like tank clearing and a lot of logistic planning as well. Because when you run campaign, you need to be clear in terms of the volumes that are going through and the volumes that are going out. So all these takes a lot of detailed planning. We also had the task of, syndicating with the authorities, and in our case with the national competent authorities or agencies in countries such as Netherlands, Germany, and Italy. So we need to cross-check with them in terms of whatever documentation that we are submitting and the details that we are submitting. Is that up to the requirement at the NCA level, right? And this is still something that we have to do, and it is no clarity at this point in time. And finally, I think for some exporters, certainly we ourselves, we are in the midst of a trial because it is essential for us to identify and mitigate potential implementation challenges. So as you can see, it is a very, very laborious exercise in which we have to undertake in order to be able to try to comply, because at this stage, we are not even 100% sure that despite doing all of this, we may be 100% in compliance. Let me move on to some of the challenges, right? And I have quite a number of them. And number one is, I think, the definition of forest, where the EU basically adopted the FAO definition. I think this definition is suitable for temperate geographies, but it's certainly not suitable for tropical, tropical climate, because in the tropical region, the climate and the ecological conditions promote rapid vegetation, and lands that are left unattended just for a few weeks can quickly develop into dense vegetation that will then contradict the EUDR forest definition. So the risk really is that, for example, a land that has been cleared in 2009 but left naturally to reforest may after that be classified as forest based on the definition. And this is certainly, and we've seen some of this risk of palm oil cultivation on land after the 31st of December of 2020 that could be deemed to have been deforested under the EUDR, right? So that's the challenge number one. Number two, we need due diligence requirements in a blend, right? When compliant goods from different origins are combined in a blend, due diligence statement must encompass the origins of all goods that have been added to the blend since the silo or the tank was last completely emptied. So this conflicts with the commonly used FIFO method, because under FIFO, the earliest entries into the tank or silo are assumed to have been used and removed first. And so, for example, if a product is removed from a tank in 2025 under FIFO, it does not require tracing back to batches first added to the silo or tank in 2021 when it was last empty. So the risk here is that there is a system burden because you need to include data of all materials in the silo or tank since the last complete emptying. There is continuous monitoring obligation whereby even if there are no recent procurements, this could increase the risk of non-compliance for factors beyond our immediate control. And there will be operation downtime, potentially up to 4 weeks, that will impact operational efficiency because of the need for emptying the tanks. So that's challenge number two. Number three, we feel that the country risk assessment that's required under Article 10 is a duplicating exercise, because all operators are required to do so, right? And in addition to that, the EU Commission, as per Article 29, is also undertaking assessment of countries. All operators are required to do the same. The outcome really is not going to be very dissimilar. So what you're going to have is all the operators making the same finding and submitting the same finding for the purposes of EUDR compliance. So essentially, there's a lot of redundancy. Challenge number four is the uncertainty on the due diligence compliant. This is with regards to Article 9, which requires collection of adequately conclusive and verifiable information that covers a gamut of matters that needs to be submitted. It is very, very complex and it's very complicated. And at this point, I think there's still quite a lot of unclear reference points for evidences, and there's uncertainty in terms of due diligence compliance as there are no clear guidelines on which authorities or entities can validate or confirm the acceptability. So on our part, what we intend to do as part of the trial is to approach the NCAs and test our submission with them to see whether it meets their requirement. But again, at this point, there is no certainty. Challenge number 5 is the multiple upload of static data, because every consignment of relevant products to the EU, the operators are required to upload traceability and plantation information. And this is a very repetitive process that is highly resource intensive, especially for bulk commodities and their derivatives. And the same plantation information must be repeatedly uploaded for all the different consignments. So there are a lot of operational inefficiencies because you're repeating something that is static. You're elevating the operational costs. And of course, there could be systemic strain on even the EU information system itself, right? Challenge number 6 is gap in terms of supply chain readiness. I think Malaysia and in fact in Indonesia as well, 40% of our palm output are produced by smallholders. And we already have discovered in our supply chain engagement that the independent smallholders are struggling to be able to comply because they come through the intermediaries, the dealers that was mentioned earlier, and they simply don't have the economies of scale, and they are dependent on the intermediaries. But that in itself becomes the bottleneck, right? The transparency of the intermediaries to the mill at this point in time is simply not there. And the majority of the smallholders are not able to fulfill the basic EUDR requirements, including the polygons or even providing proof of legality requirements, for example, in the areas of human rights. And they also lack resources to maintain detailed records, leading to incomplete traceability data. So smallholder exclusion is a very real risk. This could possibly lead to reduction in available feedstock, which would then lead to higher feedstock prices. And what that could translate into is employment, affecting the employment of various industries in the EU, particularly in the downstream. There are some other more technical concerns, and these are some of them. So for example, the interpretation as per the FAQ, while on the surface or prima facie seems to indicate a particular interpretation, this is not something that we have been able to confirm. I think we have sought consultant and legal opinion, and the opinions have been varied. So for example, the import of an Annex 1 product before the cutoff deadline for processing into another Annex 1 product, or the import of Annex 1 product for processing into a non-Annex 1 product, right? So in case A, for example, it could be crude palm oil into, let's say, fatty alcohol. In the case of B, it could be the production of fatty alcohol into a carboxylated product, which is currently not covered under Annex 1. Then there is a question of Annex 1 product that is imported before the cutoff date for resale or distribution without further processing after the cutoff date. And then finally, the import of the same product, but for staged distribution after the cutoff date. So these are questions which have elicited different opinions from different consultants and legal experts. And perhaps today we can get some clarity of this. So our takeaway, and I think this is really the takeaway of the exporters, is that the definition and interpretation is somewhat onerous, and this covered the forest definition, the non-acceptance of the FIFO method, the uncertainty of the due diligence compliance, and the transitional period concern, which I've just mentioned earlier. Secondly, I think the obligation in terms of what is expected is somewhat onerous as well. Country risk assessment and the multiple upload of static data will be two of those examples. And finally, we think that there is inadequate runway for supply chain readiness. If you go back to the slide where I talk about the 7 different steps in which we need to go through, it takes an enormous amount of time and resources to be able to do that. And the implication is we are risking smallholder exclusion. We are reducing the availability of feedstock into Europe, which translate into higher prices for the consumer because it will be passed on. And in cases where operators in Europe will find it difficult to sustain themselves because of the high feedstock price, then we may be talking about employment in the EU that will be at risk. So for example, we are a member of APAG or APAC in Europe. There are 27 members and we represent about 100,000 workers in Europe. And if any of them are not able to survive this transition, then you are potentially looking at loss of jobs. So I'll just end there and then we will take a further discussion in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Khoo. While Khoo has already posed a number of challenges that the Malaysian or even generally the palm oil exporters are facing at the moment, I think, Henrik, there are lots more questions that are coming in from the participants. Not just for Henrik, we've just had 2 presentations and we've already got 28 questions lined up for our presenters. So you're going to have your hands full for this. For information of all participants, Henrik, I just have to make this announcement. Some of them thought that, you are not presenting today because we have changed the sequence of the presentation. The reason being, we wanted to let the exporters and the EU operator and even MSPO to go first, so that then Henrik can listen to those comments and probably give her views on how the EU Commission is addressing the challenges posed. So please, participants, Henrik is here with us and she's going to join us until the end of the session. I can assure you that. Now, I just want to quickly summarize what Khoo Kok Peng mentioned in his presentation. Number of challenges. Uniformity defining forests across different regions, particularly here in the tropical areas. So that's one issue that he had posed. Conflict between EUDR requirements for due diligence statements when blending compliant goods. Requires tracing all additions since the last complete emptying of a silo or a tank. That's versus the commonly used first in, first out method. So what happens is this is going to increase the risk of non-compliance beyond immediate control factors. Redundancy in country risk assessment by both the EU Commission and the operators sourcing from the same country. So there is a suggestion coming from the exporters for more collaborative efforts involving the EU, the producing countries, the operators and exporters so that we can streamline these evaluations. Uncertainty regarding the validation of evidence provided by the compliance, which could cause delays and increase the risk of non-compliance due to unclear authorities or entities responsible for validation. And the resource-intensive nature of uploading data into the EU information system. I think this has repeatedly come up in many conversations that we've had with exporters, especially for bulk commodities. And this is going to result in significant administrative burdens and definitely higher operational costs. And I just end with one thing for smallholders. This also has been repeatedly said many, many times at discussions Malaysia and Indonesia has had with the EU. There is definitely going to be the potential exclusion of smallholders from the supply chain. We've heard that from Khoo himself, from the exporters' viewpoint, due to their limited resources and capability to meet the EUDR requirements, and not forgetting the costs involved with technology for traceability. It's beyond that, it's a substantial challenge for them. And it's interesting what Khoo mentioned. What deforestation question are we talking about with regards to the palm oil sector? Over the years, we have seen WRI data coming out and saying Malaysia has reduced its deforestation rates by 56%, similarly for Indonesia. And one of the highest yields you can get for a commodity, lowest land use, certified not just by one certification system, many certification systems. A very small area in Malaysia is planted with oil palm. I need to repeat this. Only 17% of our total land area is planted with oil palm, 5.65 million hectares. And all that provides an income for many deserving smallholders. We leave you with that. We go down to the third speaker now, and that's Daphne. Daphne is going to speak from the perspective and the challenges that are being faced by the EU operators. She's the General Manager of Sustainability External Engagement at Wilmar International. With over a decade of sustainability experience at Wilmar, she has implemented smallholder support programs in Latin America and engaged deeply in EU regulations, including the EUDR. So Daphne will discuss about strategies and challenges faced by the EU operators in preparing for EUDR. She will focus on Wilmar's efforts, challenges in meeting EUDR requirements, and the potential impact of fully segregated palm oil shortages on the EU supply chain and consumers. Daphne?
Yes, thank you, Belle. Can everybody hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can, Daphne.
Okay, perfectly. Thank you very much for the introduction, and of course, thank you for having me here. And I will immediately dive in because it connects perfectly to what was just shared by KLK. So I'm going to take a look at the importer in Europe, although I am now in Wilmar International. Previously, of course, I was in Wilmar Europe. And as Belle was saying, I was in contact with the European authorities discussing this, I think already since 2019, 2020, that I have been in discussion with the politicians on this. And the funny thing is, or you can say the not so funny thing is, that many of the questions which I just saw in the chat, these were exactly the same questions which I asked for the last 2 years or the last 3 years already. So many of these were already addressed, and unfortunately with a negative answer. And this is also what you can read back in the regulations. But I will try to go a little bit further on some of the items during my presentation. So to start with, let's make a simple example. So Wilmar Europe is supplied in Europe by Wilmar International. Let's say a very simple example, right? So by Wilmar in Asia or Malaysia. So Wilmar International is judged by all these rating agencies, which you see here on this screen. So all these rating agencies are looking at Wilmar International performance with regards to sustainability on numerous different range of elements. Differing the social elements, the environmental elements, climate. You see that from the CDP to the human rights, the child forum. So many elements Wilmar International is judged on already or rated on already. Unfortunately, this has very little consequence on complying with EUDR. Which is a bit strange, right? Because we achieved all of these things, but this has very little impact on how this exporter to Europe into our Wilmar Europe supply actually can comply with EUDR. The same example I want to give from the Wilmar Europe side. So in Wilmar Europe, for the longest time since 2015, we are reporting already traceability to mill. You see on the left-hand side, it's Olenex. On the right-hand side is Wilmar. These are European entities. Since 2015, they are already reporting. You see almost 100% traceability to mill. Since 2016, also traceability to plantation. You see almost 100% traceability to plantation. We're also reporting on IRF. This is the framework for demonstrating implementation of your NDPE policies. We're also reporting that since around 2020, if I'm correct. You see, we're doing very well, fully implemented. But the question is this helping us now with complying with EUDR? And I'm very sad to say, yes and no. So partially yes, but mainly no. And this is probably not the answer you wanted to hear. As many already said just now in this presentation, it's all about Article 9. You see on the left-hand side here, Article 9. What is Article 9? Those are the requirements which an importer needs to have. These are the data sets an importer needs to have of the palm product, which they, palm kernel products, which they import into Europe. Yeah, so it's from 1A to H, those elements you need to have when you're importing. I highlighted the challenging ones, which is the geolocation. We just already heard about that. The geolocation on the right-hand side, you see the definition, bigger than 4 hectares. You already heard it from Josil. Yeah, so for everything we import, we need to have those maps. Everybody already said it. Those maps are often not available by the smallholders. For the big suppliers, not a problem. It's the smaller suppliers who have challenges with those maps. The second highlighted part is the proof of deforestation free, right? Internally and with external consultants, Wilmar is monitoring, satellite monitoring its full supply base. So we're satellite monitoring more than 23 million hectares globally, right? But are we expected to send all this information to the EU? Well, when we're doing a mixed import, of course, everything is EUDR compliant, otherwise you cannot import. But it's about providing the proof of deforestation free. That is the challenge. And the next thing is that you have to, we already discussed it, that you have to show compliance with the local laws or local legal requirements. That's another challenge. And you see, this is all in Article 9. And as Koen was just saying already, Article 10, where you need to do the due diligence, it's all not so important because you just need to deliver this Article 9. Even if you are supplying from a low-risk country or a high-risk country, the requirements are exactly the same. So even that doesn't matter that much. So what are we, Wilmar or Olenex in Europe, doing to make sure that we are complying? Well, first of all, as I was just saying, since many years, we already try to engage with the authorities, both in the Netherlands, in Germany, where we have our refineries, but also in Brussels, with the European politicians. We are trying to engage to clarify, for instance, that there is a definition difference between the one Europe is using, the FAO, and the one palm oil for the longest time is already using the HEV-HES, the HSA approach. Right? We have been clarifying this to them. When I spoke to them, they say, yes, yes, I never saw it back in the regulation. And well, I leave it up to Henriette to discuss this, but I can guess it's because they want to have one definition for all the commodities, right? But this is a problem for us. So besides the fact that Wilmar is engaging with all these authorities to get clarity on the regulation, because at the moment we feel that's the biggest challenge, that there is unclarity. These are the challenges we are seeing, which were already mentioned. Most of these were already mentioned in this presentation before. But the first one is, of course, the compliance with the local laws. I just mentioned it. We see, however, a big positive note in the MSPO certification, right? Although there might be small things which are not 100%, it's sort of impossible to know 100% sure, but it's a great start for your due diligence. So everybody who is MSPO certified, great for you, good for you. It's your best ticket into the EU, because it means you went through that whole auditing process already. Somebody already looked at all these items which are actually in the EUDR. So first step, MSPO, great for compliance with the local law. Indonesia, completely different story, very challenging. The next one, the EUDR system. Yeah, this is a completely different beast, I would say. So Wilmar, at the beginning of the year, Wilmar was in a pilot of testing the EUDR information system. Yeah, we can talk very long and very short about it, but this is what my colleagues were saying. We need a much better, robust and workable system. This was the feedback In a bit, I will show you some how much feedback we provided. But it was not working well for different reasons. The number of uploads we could do, the format of uploading we could do. It was already mentioned in the chat just now, and I will show you in the next slide a couple of more examples. But we were also told that there is no second testing. There will be no second testing anymore. There will be information videos which you can consult online, apparently. Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is, of course, the format, the GeoJSON format. That's a not workable solution because many others use different other formats, and it doesn't say in the regulation that you have to do GeoJSON format. It just says you have to provide geolocations. So this is an additional thing which I think is a bit strange that it's now so strict that it has to be in GeoJSON, because it doesn't mention it in the regulation. And there's, of course, you can follow the progress of the EU of the system. You can follow it in the on the EUDR website. My last point on this slide, the deforestation definition, we know that is a challenge, right? How does Wilmar look at this? We, of course, always follow HEV-HES, but now with this additional requirement, if we will supply from plantation with development after 2020, we will look whether it is compliant with FAO, yes or not. So here you quickly quickly see passing by the feedback we were giving. I'm not giving you all the detailed feedback because you probably will freak out. But this is the feedback we were giving. We don't know what of this will be taken into account. But as I was just saying, there's feedback different from, for instance, you can only put in volumes in kg and not in metric tons. Which is a bit strange, right? Because in the palm oil industry, everything goes in metric tons. Very simple example. Or some of the codes which are in Annex 1 were not available in the system to choose, right? We could only upload 100 polygons, and then you could not adjust them afterwards, and there were error messages. These are just some of the basic things which the system did not allow or filled in. So how are we going forward? How is Wilmar as a company in both origin, here in Malaysia, Indonesia, and in destination country Europe, how are we how are we continuing with this matter? Well, first of all, in origin, so in Malaysia, Indonesia, we are making certain refineries EUDR compliant, which means that those refineries are only buying from EUDR compliant mills, or mills who can keep EUDR compliant CPO, PKO separate from non-EUDR compliant. So you hear already that I'm saying a lot of separation, segregation, or dedicated mills, which is all super inefficient in a commodity industry, of course. So I was just saying palm oil, but this is also for palm kernel oil. So also in the crushers, we have either dedicated crushers or they should keep it separately for non-compliant. So this is how Wilmar in origin is preparing. So the big question is, who cannot comply, right? And I think Koen also just mentioned it. Who can theoretically have difficulty to comply? It's the smallholders. Why? Because they often don't have the land titles, or they got it from the government, a piece of land to develop, and they never got the correct land titles, or their relatives maybe passed away and they never got the correct land titles, something like that, right? So typically a smallholder problem. Does that mean that Wilmar is banning smallholders from their supply chain? And this is a very good question. Will Wilmar ban smallholders from the supply chain? Well, if I'm Wilmar Europe, I say we can only take palm oil which is compliant with EUDR. So at the moment, if smallholders are not complying, we cannot take smallholders into the EUDR. And that's that. It's not that we want it, it's a very logic consequence. On the other hand, if I talk on behalf of Wilmar International, of course, we will continue to buy from the smallholders, but we cannot send their oil to Europe. So we need to keep it separately, or we need to transport it to mills who are not supplying to the EU. Is this an efficient solution? Of course not. It's a very inefficient and often costly solution. Does this mean that smallholders are not complying with EUDR? Absolutely not. Smallholders can perfectly comply with EUDR, but just miss those maps because they never got to it, or it's too complicated. They don't have the time, or they don't have the knowledge most of the time to do the geolocations of their lands, of their plantations. So with this, we cannot take their oil. Are they non-compliant? Absolutely not. They can work on that plantation, or they can live on that plantation already since 2001. Just to clarify. So this was the view from Wilmar in origin. Now the view from Wilmar in Europe. So Wilmar Europe is, for instance, a first importer. Wilmar Europe, or Olenex, first importer. So we can only import if we have all the items of the ship which comes in, of the suppliers, all the items of Article 9, which you just saw. All those data fields we need to have of all the FFB suppliers into the shipment. So with that, we need to put all that information the importer need to put that information in the EU information system. We then get the output of that is the due diligence statement reference number, the security token, and then we will share the DDS, the due diligence statement, or the security token with each delivery to our customers, right? So we will get the information in, we will put it in a system, and then when we sell part of the oil, we will give it to our customers. Yeah, and so if the products which we're buying or which we're selling are not in Annex 1, then our buyer doesn't need to do anything. Yeah, so and all the first importers, so not only Wilmar, but also other first importers in the EU, they should ask for the information in Article 9 to be able to comply. And we also wrote a sustainability brief on that, and maybe we can share that afterwards with whomever is interested in that, and then you can see a little bit more in detail what I just clarified. And with that, I think it is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Daphne. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yes, enormous challenges even for the operators. I still recall the reason why MSPO was made mandatory by the government of Malaysia and independently audited is to ensure that we do not leave behind the smallholders. They form a very important component of the oil palm sector or the palm oil industry here in Malaysia, not just here, but even in other producing countries. Take Malaysia, for example, 1.5 million hectares out of the 5.65 million hectares is owned by smallholders. It's a source of income for them. But the polygon maps are an issue. It's going to be a big problem. The government will have to be involved in that because it's a cost involved, and no way are smallholders going to be paying for technology. I recall this question being posed previously when we said, what do we do to get the polygon maps for the smallholders? We were told that all they need is smartphones. And we know that smallholders will not be able to if they are ever able to purchase the smartphones, they are never going to be able to use the technology of smartphones. These are people that are 50, 60 years old and above. And the other thing, we are always reminded, a lot of the small plantations are located in very remote areas. Internet can be very erratic in those areas, so it's going to be tough for them. So I will not repeat what you've said. I know there are some questions that you have posed, but I'm sure our Henrik has taken note of that. We want to straight go to Henrik. An extremely important presentation from her. Everyone's looking forward to hear from Henrik. I don't want to put pressure on Henrik. We're going to make sure that, all the presenters take equal pressure from today's presentation. So let me just do a quick introduction on Henrik. She is the first counselor for environment, climate action, and digital cooperation at the EU delegation in Indonesia. Extensive experience, including roles at the European Commission and the EU delegation to India. She holds a Master of Science in Chemical and Environmental Engineering from the Technical University of Copenhagen. Henrik's presentation will cover the latest updates and developments in the implementation of EUDR, and this includes the updates on the FAQ sites, guidance documents, the information system, the EU Observatory on Deforestation platform, country benchmarking, and the EU's efforts in engaging with producer countries. Henrik, we welcome you. Your presentation, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to the previous presenters that has actually covered a number of the things I wanted to cover, but also posed some questions for me. So I think it's actually very nice that I'm at the end, so I can try to reply to some of the questions. So let me see if I can move the slides. This happened just before. Yes. Okay. So we have already heard about deforestation being reduced, in particular from the palm oil sector in Indonesia and Malaysia. But let me just highlight that the context of the reason why the EU has come forward with this regulation is that there has still been a very significant deforestation over the very recent years. So since 1990 to 2020, we have lost 420 million hectares of forest worldwide, and that is an area that's larger than the European Union. This is important because deforestation and forest degradation are very important drivers of climate change. Actually, according to IPCC, 11% of greenhouse gas emissions can directly be linked to deforestation and forest degradation, and also, of course, very important drivers for biodiversity loss. A very significant share of that forest loss is illegal, and this is why we have come forward with this regulation that moves beyond legality, so beyond what we have covered with previous instruments. We have also seen that 90% of the deforestation that happens worldwide is provoked by the expansion of agricultural land, and that this is linked to a very particular series of commodities. So many commodities across the globe are, of course, contributing to deforestation in more or less quantity, but the actual number of commodities that are the main contributors are quite limited. And then if you combine this with the ones of which the EU is a major consumer, then we get to the number of the commodities that are actually now included in the regulation. So palm oil, soy, wood, cattle, cocoa, coffee, and rubber. And again, the EU is regulating on this because we are a major consumer of this. There's nobody's trying to reduce consumption of these commodities. It's commodities that we like in the EU and that we would like to continue to use. But our consumers are very clear that they do not want to buy products that can be associated with deforestation and forest degradation. And that's why we've come forward with the regulation. So we have heard already, I saw some of the questions in the chat, so I will still allow myself a minute to cover some of the basic requirements, even if some questions are very sophisticated. There are also some questions that are more basic. So I just want to make sure that everybody sees eye to eye on what is actually the EU deforestation regulation. So what it is a mandatory due diligence system that will request that the operators, the EU operators, who place the product on the market in the EU, or if they export them from the EU, will have to carry out due diligence. As we have heard in some of the previous presentations, only products that are deforestation-free and legal can be allowed on the market or can be exported from the EU market. So the thing that the EU operators need to do is a due diligence statement that confirms legality, deforestation-free. So we've heard already that there are a number of different types of laws, that we've heard already that there is a cutoff date and that we apply the FAO definitions. and that there has to be a strict traceability that can link the commodities to the plot of land where they were producing. And the mandatory polygons was also already covered. So the reason why we do the FAO definition, why we use the FAO definition, let me start with that already. So this has, of course, this piece of legislation has come out of a very thorough a process where we have investigated a large number of different options. What has been very important for the EU is that, of course, this has to be fair towards all the countries that may be affected by the regulation. If we would go to a situation where we would apply Malaysia's legislation for products coming from Malaysia, sorry, not legislation, but definitions, Brazil's for products coming from Brazil, then I'm pretty sure that in a very short span of time, we would have a completely different conversation about the fairness of that system. So our impact assessment told us that the only way we can actually move forward in a way that is fair is to use the FAO definitions. So that is what we are doing. We heard already also in some of the previous presentation a request for validation, acceptance, different types of work of the existing verification systems, including MSPO. There's also ISPO and there are others. And of course, we are very much in favor of these systems. I think the presentation that Joseph gave shows extremely well how valuable MSPO will be for the EU operators that will have to carry out due diligence. But the reason why an MSPO certificate cannot replace a due diligence statement is because MSPO is a Malaysian system. There's no way an EU operator can go and check and validate MSPO certificates. We don't have that legal mandate. So the system is designed so that the legal requirements is on the EU operator and on something that he or she can control. But of course, if I'm an EU operator and I have to do a due diligence and I know that my consignment has an MSPO certificate, I know MSPO is a very good system, I will be much less stringent. I will feel the need to be much less stringent in the checks and in the information that I request. So I think it's not about either one or the other. It's about that this is a really a supportive tool, a supportive information for the operators that will have to carry out the due diligence. And again, the due diligence statement is simple. It's only these points here that I show. It is not about providing all the 70,000 pieces of background documentation. So let's be fair to that. Now, what are we doing now in order to prepare for implementation? Indeed, there's a very short time until the system enters into force. We've heard a lot of speculation that there might be delays. That is not the case. The system will enter into force on the 1st of January next year as specified. And we're working now very hard on some of the issues that still need to be put in place and made operational before the entry into application. So the frequently asked questions, I will come into more detail on all of this. We're working on guidance document on technical and legal matters. We are setting up the IT system that we already heard presented from Wilmar. We are strengthening support tool to producer countries, and we are working on other strands, for example, on the deforestation observatory, risk benchmarking, etc. So now let me go into all of these. So the frequently asked questions. Actually, I think we've had, I cannot give a number, but I think I myself have had more than 100 of these types of engagement since before the EUDR came out. I know that for a fact that every question that I have ever received, I have fed it into the frequently asked questions that are being developed by the colleagues in Europe. I know that others are doing the same all over the world. So we have really used this type of dialogue with the people who are more directly involved and affected to try to understand what is it that may be the uncertainties, what is it that may be the difficulties, and we're trying to continuously update these frequently asked questions and provide where we don't have the answers really to develop them, because of course there's no way that anybody can think about everything before developing such a big piece of legislation. The first version was published in June 2023. There was an update back in December. There are over 80 question and answers now. And there is a new version with approximately 40 new questions that will come out in the next few weeks. It's already prepared at the technical level. We are waiting the political clearance, but just I can already lift the curtain on some of the things that might be or there will be in there. First of all, there will be more updates on the features of the information system that are covering all kinds of things, such as the details on the modality for access and format of the files, some of the questions that was raised by Daphne in her presentations. There will be additional guidance on traceability obligations, including how to conduct traceability for composite products that we heard also from the colleague from Malaysia. There will be additional guidance on the due diligence obligations. There will be clarifications on what kind of checks that has to be carried out and on what documentation will be required to show compliance. There will be some more commodity or product specific elements, for example, on traceability for cattle or traceability for packaging products, where we have received a number of specific concerns. And there will also be more clarity on some of the linkages with other EU policies that are covering similar areas, for example, the Corporate Sustainable Due Diligence Directive and others. So this is something to look forward to. I've given the link here to the current version, but really do look out, because in the next very few days there will be an updated version with 50% additional questions on these topics. Then the guidance document, as I mentioned, they are also in the pipeline. They are also really at the final stage, and they are covering again some of the issues that we have discussed here. Definition of agricultural use is a topic that we've often been discussing in this type of webinars. How do we deal with agroforestry and so on? This will be clarified in much more detail in the guidance. On legality, indeed, there will also be more specifications on how to assess this, what kind of not all the legality for all the countries, for all the commodities, but more the principles of what is it that operators need to look for legality. Again, as I mentioned, there will be specific information of composite products where the information might be more challenging to produce. So we are taking making specific efforts to make sure that this is very clear in the guidance. There will be a specific section in the guidance on certification. So as I just mentioned, we want to make it clear to our operators that we do welcome certification schemes and that we welcome the use of certification schemes, the information in certification schemes such as MSPO and others, and how they can actually benefit from this and use it as a source of information. Then additional clarity on the due diligence process and exactly what we are expecting from the due diligence from the operators. Then the information system. So as we already heard, there has been a pilot testing. So it was developed at the end of last year, and the pilot testing with over 100 companies, where Wilmar was one of them, took place between December 2023 and January 2024. It was a relatively short testing period, but it did give really a lot of valuable information. And of course, I think anybody who's ever been involved in IT development knows that it's very normal that there are a large number of bugs in the system. If you look at your smartphone, the amount of times that you get an update of the operating system because they have been fixing bugs, I think it's just an indication of that. So colleagues have been working since January this year on continuous improvement and testing and internally testing and fixing some of all these bugs. There will be dedicated trainings available later in 2024 for all those who will have to use the information system and feed information in there. And on the 2nd of December, in November, the system will be open for user registration. So even if the entry into application is only by 1st of January, by November, users can already start putting in their registrations. And by 2nd of December, there will be opening for submitting due diligence statements. So you could say that while it's maybe not a second test, it's at least a period to check out how the things work and fix anything that may not be worked on. There's also work ongoing on interconnection with other systems via something that's called API that I'm definitely not an expert enough to talk about, but just for you to understand that this is ongoing. Then coming back to the definition, the forest definition. So in December last year, there was a map, a global forest cover map that was published by the Joint Research Center JRC, that is the research arm of the European Commission. And this was based on global data. So it's very clear to understand that this forest map is not a legally binding document. It's not a tool that can, with 100% certainty, say here is a forest in Malaysia according to FAO definition. So the Forest Observatory is based on FAO definition because it is supposed to be a tool that our operators can use to check if there have been or have not been forest at a certain point or at the cutoff date. So there are revised versions of the forest cover map that are being developed now and will be available before the entry into application in the fourth quarter of this year. So the way this revisions are being done is by engaging in a very detailed manner with the producer countries. So, for example, tomorrow we will have a consultation meeting between the JRC and Indonesia, where we will compare the different maps, not compare the different definitions, because it's not a discussion of definitions, it's a discussion of how does the forest map have to look for Indonesia with the FAO definition. We're doing the same with other countries, and we welcome this type of discussion. So I'm pretty certain that this will also happen with Malaysia at some point in time. There will also be another work stream started, or is being started right now in Q2 to have a preliminary global map related to forest degradation. That is, of course, an area where all of us, I think, collectively know much less. But work is being started and is expected to be available also in Q4 this year. Then the benchmarking, so there were a lot of questions or comments around the relation between the benchmarking under Article 29 and the risk assessment. And it's true that some of the words that are in there are the same, but it's actually two relatively different exercises. I have my colleague Jeremy in the panel a little bit later on, and he can talk much more about this than I can. But really, the objective of the benchmarking is to develop a tool that can help the competent authorities in the EU to focus their resources. So we know that in many areas of the world, there has been agricultural production for a large number of years. There have not been any forests. So we want to make sure that, and there has not been any deforestation in recent years, according to all the data that we agree on. So we want to make sure that our competent authorities can focus on the areas and the parts of countries where there's still a risk of deforestation. So this is what the benchmarking is meant for. It's meant to say this area, you need to be less concerned if you import from there. For this area, we know that things might still not be completely clear. So that's how it should be seen. The development of the methodology for the benchmarking is ongoing. And for us, we very much realize the complaints or the criticism that this is very late in the day. But for the EU, it's really important that the methodology is solid and based on objective factors, so that we are able to justify it and again treat anybody in a fair manner. Once the methodology and the initial data collection is finalized, then there will be a transparent process where we will explain all this to our counterparts and also in case of countries that are at risk of being classified as high risk or parts of countries, we will have a dedicated dialogue with these countries, as it's also stipulated already in the regulation itself. As mentioned, we are stepping up cooperation with third countries. We have been doing now for a long time. We're engaging very much with other major consumer countries, such as China and the US, to make sure that we, as much as possible, harmonize our thinking. We have a joint task force with Indonesia and Malaysia that you might be aware of, and that I will cover a little bit more. We've had technical missions to Brazil and Paraguay, and our commissioner has been going to many countries. He's also been here in the region in Malaysia and Indonesia recently. So we do have both a political level and, in particular, also a very technical level discussion with many of the producer and consumer countries. So, as I mentioned, we have done very extensive outreach from EU delegations, from the Commission, but also from our EU member states that are going to be at the forefront of the implementation of this. We have a number of dedicated outreach projects, and I will talk a little bit about them in a moment. Also, something that is very important is that we have the deforestation multi-stakeholder platform, and if you're not already aware of this, you definitely should be. All the material from this multi-stakeholder platform is publicly available. Interested producer and consumer countries are invited to these meetings, the key sectoral associations and civil society organizations, and there has been all the work on implementation, including what I have just presented, has been continuously presented in this multi-stakeholder platform in order to get feedback and input from all the relevant actors. The next meeting will be on the 24th of September. There was one was it this week or last week? I can't remember. But the next one will be on the 29th of September, and that is the 29th meeting of the deforestation platform. So the platform started working already during the development of the regulation, when we were doing the impact assessment, when we were considering the different options. We were seeking this feedback through this platform, and as I said, all the material is publicly available. Then just a few words on this joint task force with Indonesia and Malaysia. As you probably know, these two countries are the only countries in the world which have such a task force, and that came about because your Deputy Prime Minister from Malaysia and the Indonesian Coordinating Minister went to Brussels at a high level and explained to our political leaders about some of the concerns, similar concerns that you are raising now and that we're discussing now. And we agreed that it was actually justified to have a specific work stream with Indonesia and Malaysia, so we created this ad hoc joint task force. In the first meeting of the joint task force, we agreed on what are the work streams that we need to particularly focus on between Indonesia, Malaysia, and the EU. And these are the five that are also, again, very similar to what we are discussing here today. How do we make sure that smallholders remain included in this, involved and included in the supply chain and don't get excluded from the supply chain? How can we use the national certification scheme? So everything I just explained. How can we work together on traceability, not only for palm oil, but also for the other commodities that may be less developed than palm oil? How can we compare data on deforestation and forest degradation? So what I just mentioned about comparing the maps. And how can we deal with data privacy? So we are developing the system so that it's really state of the art in terms of security, and we're trying to understand how this is compatible or not with the laws of the countries of production. So the task force has met 2 times. It's going to meet again just after the summer. And meanwhile, there has been a lot of progress under each of these 5 work streams for both Indonesia and Malaysia and jointly. So I think there's really a lot of progress and a lot of as I said, technical level discussions that really try to raise erase some of these concerns. Some of the ongoing programs that we have used here in the region to support, you've seen the presentation from Kami, so the work that Jose was presented on the gap analysis with MSPO. We've done also one on ISPO. with the EUDR requirements. We have the SAFE program, that is a huge program, global program, but also has a big component here in the region that focuses on smallholder inclusions, how to develop, we have pilot initiative on how to develop practical, innovative solutions for smallholders to get their data, to make sure that they can actually provide their information in the supply chain and that they are traceable and all the issues that we have discussed. So we have the pilot initiative, and they will be spread and strengthened, rolled out also to other players. So we will have a kind of a toolbox for smallholders through this program. We also have a program that's called EUDR engagement, where we deal with where we cover 5 countries of the region: Indonesia, Malaysia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam, and where we really try to more than what I can do now in 15 minutes, where we try to really engage with all the stakeholders and explain and get feedback and make sure that this communication is functioning. We use this also to collect information that we can put into the frequently asked questions document and so on. And I heard that there was a request or a need for some more specific communication also to smallholders. We are developing that through this project because, of course, there is a big difference between something that we are saying in conferences like this and what we actually need to explain to the people who are working on the ground. We also have the Flex Asia program that is supporting forest governance and the sustainable timber trade in ASEAN. So timber has had a bit of a different trajectory, at least here in Indonesia, where there has been FLECT licensing for some time. And we're trying to see how can we use the experiences for timber to also to share those with other countries in the ASEAN region, and also to share between the different commodities to make sure that we can benefit from the work that has already been ongoing. So this were some of the things I had planned to cover, and I hope that I managed to take on board at least some of the questions that were raised. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Henrik, for the very detailed presentation, but I believe there are still many, many questions on the minds of the participants. I mean, we've been having a number of webinars on EUDR. This is the first time that I've seen more than 50 questions posed. So the questions are not just for you. I think it's meant for all the speakers. We are going to share these questions equally. But I'm going to start with the moderator's question. I would have the first privilege of doing that. I think, Henrik, you must be aware the FT recently carried an article where the US had demanded that the EU delay the ban on EUDR because it's affecting some of its producers of cocoa, timber, and sanitary products. Now, similarly, we know that that's a major impact on our smallholders, our palm oil producers here. So the question I have is a delay in the implementation likely to happen, with pressure coming from not just the developing countries, but even now the developed countries? And can we then expect an exemption for smallholders from producing countries? Henrik?
No, we cannot, unfortunately, for the smallholders or for your question. But the legislative text, the legal text is there. It is being implemented, as you can see. A lot of things are ongoing, both on the EU side, but also, as I tried to explain, on the producer's side. We know that a lot of work for all the commodities is ongoing in order to actually keep smallholders in the supply chain. I saw in the presentation from Vilma that, of course, it is possible to supply the EU market with products that are compliant or that are following the EUDR requirements. What we hope will happen later on is that it is not only for the EU market, and I saw again in the Vilma presentation that there is an aim to try to make more and more smallholders able to be in the supply chain. And this is, I think, what we see not only here in the region, not only for palm oil, but really for all the commodities in all the regions. And it doesn't matter actually that the US is also feeling the need to have to change certain things. It's the same for everybody. It applies in the same way to everybody.
Thank you, Henrik.
Including in the EU.
Thank you very much for that. I apologize for the Q&A session. We have two additional panelists here. They will be assisting with the questions posed by participants. I would like to welcome Dr. Jeremy Broadbent from EFI and also Tan Chi Yong from MSPO. So the next question is for Henrik and EFI. In a scenario in where there are complex supply chain covering plantations to manufacturers and end customers, whose responsibility within the supply chain is it to manage a monitoring system and the due diligence statement compilation, or it is information documentation that is forwarded or piggybacked from upstream to downstream to comply? Henrik, would you like to take that, or even EFI?
I can start, but I think maybe it's already covered in my presentation, but I can try to explain it again. So there is no specific format under which the documentation needs to be kept and maintained and so on. There is an obligation for the EU operator to make the due diligence statement, and of course, in order to do that, he or she has to have the information from. So exactly as we saw in the Wilmar presentation, Wilmar's European operator will make the due diligence statement. They will ask the question from their exporter from the country of production, and of course, this person or this entity will do their own questioning down the supply chain. So it's not perceived as a whole new system of information. That being said, for example, here in Indonesia, they have decided to go a bit of a different way. They're developing something they call a national dashboard, where they try to make all the information available for all the commodities in as much a detailed as possible manner. But maybe Jeremy, you can say something more if you want.
Yeah, I think you've covered the points that I understand as well, that the EU operators will be responsible for collecting the information, and how they do it is up to them. So I won't waste time.
Okay, let me go to question number 2, and this is for Yong and Koo. Yong from MSPO. Due diligence requires EU operators to collect the metadata documents evidence of legal compliance rather than just making reference to a MSPO report. What are the plans from MSPO to enable such sharing of critical and sensitive information throughout the value chain? And also a question for Koo from the operator or exporter perspective. What kind of consent and data sharing documentation did you establish with your supplier? Yong, would you like to take the first question? Plans from MSPO to enable sharing of critical and sensitive information throughout the value chain.
Okay, currently for MSPO, we have an application called MSPO Trace, where certain information are put in the system. So that information are considered public available. For more detail, okay, especially for more detailed information, you can get it in the MSPO audit report, which you need to get it from the certain bodies. So you need to be case by case basis to get the information. So currently, what happens is that MSPO, we are looking at how to assist in terms of how to deliver out your information, especially talking about the polygon map, especially from the smallholder. In this, we try to collaborate with MPOB, where they try to, through their application called GeoPalm, they will have verified the polygon map for the smallholder. So we're hoping that we can collaborate with MPOB and make sure this information can be transferred along the supply chain. But in this case also, MSPO will make sure that the privacy, the confidential data of the smallholder are taken care of. So in this, based on what I understand from collaboration with EFI, the information that is needed, important, is just the polygon map of the production area, not the information of the example identity of the smallholder, the addresses, or the sensitive information. So for MSPO, we try to assist, but as you might understand, MSPO are not developed for EUDR.
Okay, you're not developed, but you are developing for EUDR. I know you're working towards that now. So
yeah,
the participant that I have, I just want to add on to that before I go back to Koo. What is MSPO doing to expedite closing the gaps? I mean, is there a timeline? We've only got 5 months to meet EUDR requirements. What are you doing about that?
As we have discussed with the EFI and GAP-NSCs, we try to upgrade MSPO as soon as possible. Okay, but to make sure that everyone comply or to EUDR is a bit hard because this is a national area. So instead, we hope we can collaborate with the so-called industry. Okay, the industry company that are exporting EU to collaborate in terms of assessing their supply chain data, looking at how we can help assist in make sure their supply chain can be complete as we go to smallholder. But again, there's a caveat because we need to get so-called financial support, okay, from the government to make sure that MSPO can be upgraded.
Okay, Yong, I can assure you the government will provide any financial support when it comes to helping our exporters, and the exporters are ready to assist you. I've heard all of them saying that, when is MSPO going to be ready for them to use? So it's really for MSPO to work faster to meet the EUDR compliance pathway. We want that. Two things we're asking today. MSPO be prepared and an acknowledgement from the EU on MSPO. Both things. And we look that I hope that happens before the end of the year to help our Malaysian and even the other exporters. Now, going back to KU itself. So what kind of consent and data sharing documentation did you establish with your suppliers?
I think to just extend to what Chiyong has shared just now, when we talk about traceability to the producer, we are talking about this thing called a tier 3 traceability. Right? A lot of times we have traceability to tier 1, where you are tracing the direct suppliers to the mills. But because MSPO at this point, the 2022 version is not fully implemented, you are not currently able to provide the traceability through the dealers. And that is the key to link to the tier 3. And as a result of that, that's where the gap is, has emerged, right? So where we are not able to find the information of an MSPO, or where the information is not exactly clean, that's where if we are able to identify the direct suppliers or the supply base that's coming through, either through the dealership or directly to the mill, then we will have to go to that supply and say, can you provide us with the data? And that's when the consent will obviously be required, right? So I think the complexity really is when we talk traceability, as far as EUDR is concerned, you are talking about tier 3 traceability. It's not good enough to go to the mills. It's not good enough to go to the dealers. You have to go through the dealers into the direct supplier itself, right? And that's the difficulty. Yeah, I think if I could just quickly comment on what Henrik said about the guidance document that's going to be coming up in the next couple of months. Obviously, that is going to be very useful. We certainly hope there is a lot more clarity, but the issue is our runway is no longer there. If you are talking about getting EUDR compliant supply into EU in time by the cutoff date, we are talking about preparing the shipment from September onwards. And if your guidelines are coming up in the next couple of months, and we need to digest that, we need to interpret that, and we need to syndicate that across the supply chain, I am very afraid that we are not going to be ready, right? I think if this guideline has been available many months ago, this would have made the process a lot easier. And just one final point on the FAO definition, we can agree to disagree, but I think as far as tropical producers are concerned, we maintain that that is very, very unfair for tropical producers.
Okay. I think Yong, MSPO, you've heard that from the Malaysian exporter. We really need MSPO to speed up. There are possibilities of doing it. Cost should not be a barrier to doing that anymore. I go to a question to Daphne here. It's clear that segregation will be necessary for exporting to the EU, but we know that it's difficult for all supply chains to segregate completely or all the time. Could Wilma tell us your experience dealing with this?
Yeah, we obviously have that same problem. right? This is why I think we, Wilmar is very big, and we consolidate a lot of different sources in a shipment or in a refinery, and then we ship it to Europe. So for us, this is also very difficult. And this is why we took the approach of identifying those refineries or those plants which make it relatively easy to only capture EUDR compliant supply, right? Because then all the supply into that entity is EUDR compliant. So this is how we try to do it, right? And then you don't have to segregate it. But this is super inefficient. Sorry, very often maybe not so efficient. But we have to do this because, yeah, you heard Henriette, it is happening, right? So we need to be able to comply. If there are mills who can do 2 lines, or if there are refineries who can do in also 2 lines or in batches, then you can do it segregated. But the easiest way is to make a dedicated refinery, find a dedicated refinery in origin, which we can run only on EUDR supply. But we still have challenges, and maybe for the CPO not so much, but I think we all understand for the PKO and therewith for all the oleochemical products into Europe, it's a real challenge, because you have the kernel pressure in between, where you can have where you can keep the kernels for a longer period. They take in from even more supply. So for the oleochemicals, for the PKO products, very difficult.
So Henrik, you can hear what Daphne is saying. Extremely difficult for the oleochemical derivatives. That is going to be a continuous challenge for them. But going back to the definition of forest, what Koo mentioned, a question from one of the participants, isn't the definition of forest used not necessarily representative in context of tropical climates? Is EUDR open to also be accommodating their definition based on any existing standards in Malaysia or any other affected countries, instead of MSPO changing to suit EUDR requirements? Henrik and EFI, comments on that?
No, we're not open to change anything in the EUDR. It's not a negotiation. But there is a forest definition that's enshrined in the regulation itself. Again, if we were to enter into negotiations with different countries across the world, then we would move away from the principle of equal treatment or harmonized approach. So no, that's not going to happen. But again, we are not asking anybody to change their definitions. As I just mentioned now, for example, here in Indonesia, they're providing this national dashboard, and they are not changing their forest definition. That is also vastly different from the EUDR or the FAO definition. But what they're doing is they're providing data according to FAO definition and according to their own definition. So it's simply a question of our operators have to make sure that things coming into the EU has not been first according to FAO definition by the cutoff date, that what Malaysia's definition is and what Indonesia's definition and Brazil's, that's not for us to say. I mean, you can define first as you want, but our operators have to apply one harmonious definition when they bring products on the market.
So no changes to the definition, but a lot of changes needs to be done by the producers to meet the EUDR requirements. That's a big challenge for us. Well, some flexibility may be necessary sometimes, especially for trading countries here. Again, Henrik, a question to you. What about the area previously declared as forest and converted to agriculture land before the year 2019 or even 2020? Does it affect EUDR due diligence process?
What is important is whether there was a forest or not a forest by the cutoff date. Whether it was declared as a parking lot or a forest or whatever is not so important. The important is, was there trees that were, according to the FAO definition, a forest? And if yes, then it can be considered deforestation. But if you have something that was already a plantation by the cutoff date, then there is no deforestation involved.
Henry, just
So it's the physical.
okay, just very quickly on another question. This is on data security. How is the EU going to ensure? I think this is something we have also brought up at the Malaysia-Indonesia Task Force, and we have asked how is the EU to ensure security and confidentiality of the data submitted by the operators. Can you comment on these concerns that are coming from the operators and the exporters from producer countries?
Yeah, I mean, I can just say that I mean, what my colleagues tell me, of course, I'm not involved in defining this. But what I hear is that the security is really state of the art, and we are making sure that there's no opportunity for data leaking and all of that. I think the bigger issue is that some countries may have legislation that makes it difficult for them to share data that are considered private with other countries, for example, or with in a due diligence situation. So we are looking into that as part of the joint task force. This is work stream 5. I mean, Jeremy, if you want to say more about some of the work that we have been doing, you're welcome to do it. But it's really about, it's not about whether the EU system is secure. It's going to be secure, but it's a question of whether there are laws in some countries. For example, China had a situation where actually they have a law that did not allow them to share some of the, for example, geolocation outside of China. But they have now changed. They're now in the process of changing their legislation because they realized that otherwise they would not be able to put things on the EU market. So we're trying to understand if there are such concerns in Indonesia, Malaysia, and other countries as well. And if there are, what can we do to make sure that? I mean, is there really an issue, and if so, how can we solve it? But Jeremy, please.
So what about the possibility of accepting the QR-based geolocation information? We know that there's a problem uploading the huge amount of data. Exporters are already saying, you know, that's going to be a problem in the future. Will you all consider accepting the QR codes instead? Is there a possibility of doing that? Henrik?
Can you help me on the more technical issues?
Jeremy, would you like to add to that?
I understand. I think there's a provision for uploading bulk data. Is that what you're talking about? I'm not sure about the QR codes.
Yeah, we're just saying a new option. You know, some of the exporters have spoken about an option instead of loading that in huge files. Would you accept QR codes instead for the geolocation?
I haven't heard any discussion about QR codes, but I have heard there's been some discussion with the information system being able to accept uploading of electronic information. So it doesn't have to all be typed. I understand that it doesn't all have to be typed in separately for each geolocation. So that's what I understand.
Okay. The next question, yeah. Henrik, yes, you want to
more technical. Wait for the guidance document that will come very shortly.
Okay. There is a next question for Ku and Daphne here. Can industry players share with the audience how they intend to supply European operators from day one compliance? For example, will they be supplying palm products from their own upstream operations only? Will EU operators and consumers only be linked to segregated sources after 31st December 2024? Ku, Daphne?
I'll let Daphne go first.
Thank you, Ku. We are in the process now identifying our supply chain, right? For instance, yes and no. We will be supplying from our own origin refineries to Europe, yes. And of course, we have secured then that those refineries are only producing EUDR compliant materials or keep it separately. But you can also we can also buy in Europe, we can also buy from third-party suppliers, which you are 100% sure of that they are EUDR compliant. For instance, if you're buying RSPO SG, then you also know that it is EUDR compliant because you can do the due diligence on all the information which is needed in Article 9, right? Because when you buy RSPO SG, you have all that information already, right? Then it doesn't come from a Wilmar entity. It can come, I'm just saying something, it can come from a bunch of mills in Honduras. But if, oh, not Honduras, not a good example, a bunch of mills in Guatemala. If they are RSPO SG certified, you have all that information, you can do your due diligence now already, and then you can buy, right? The same if MSPO is able to deliver all this information in their systems, let's say in 1 or 2 months' time, you can do your due diligence now already, and then as Koen was saying, you immediately have to buy because otherwise we have short time for shipment. But you see, so it doesn't need to be only from our own entities. It can also be from third-party entities, but you need to have all the information to do the due diligence now. If
I
that
think
answers.
this is very similar to Daphne, and definitely our own supply, and similarly, I'm sure Wilma as well, their very own supply is going to be the core of our supply to Europe. But that in itself is not adequate because of the onerous process that we have to undertake. It will probably mean that a lot of our existing supply is not going to meet the requirement. So then what do you do to supplement? You can do that by taking supply from your European counterparts through Rotterdam. That's one way. Or you can certainly also look at diversifying your supply out of Guatemala, Colombia. These are the countries and where you will have to go through the same process, but you might end up buying for suppliers that has RSPO service certification, for example, where the documentation and all that clarity is a lot clearer. So there's no a straitjacket sort of answer to this. But I think if you are integrated player, you are going to have some advantage. If you're not an integrated player, I think your hurdle is going to be a lot higher.
Okay. Again, a question on segregation. It's clear that segregation will be necessary for exporting to the EU. You must be fully segregated. But we know that it's difficult for all supply chains to segregate completely or at all times. How can the EUDR address segregation-related challenges such as dealers buying from both EUDR compliant and non-compliant sources or refineries processing compliant and non-compliant palm oil? Any speakers would like to take this question? Yes, Stephanie, please.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's again not very funny. Previously, when I was in Europe, I was also in these combined palm and soy working groups, and this is a topic in soy because soy is a lot imported in mass balance, and it must, even if it's RTRS, the soy certification, it's imported in mass balance, but. We said all the time there is not really like segregation or on the everything which comes to Europe should be EUDR compliant, right? So you can say it's segregation, but everything on that shipment is EUDR compliant. So that's how in origin you need to identify your suppliers. And also, if it's very difficult, we gave the example of the PKO, or in the KLK situation where you have the oleochemicals, it doesn't matter. It needs to comply. So again, I'm not saying that this is what I want, but this is the regulation. So one way or another, you need to make facilities or tanks, dedicated tanks. Yeah, I call it segregated, but all the material coming to Europe needs to comply.
Yeah, I think if I can chime in, I think when you talk about segregation in your own facilities where you have full control over, in your oleochemical plant, in your own kernel crushing plant, you would be able to do it with difficulty. For example, we have instances in our kernel crushing plant where we no longer have additional space to put out additional silos or tanks. That poses a significant problem for us because you need those tanking, right? But it is more challenging when you go further upstream because essentially at the mill, you cannot segregate. FFBs are not segregatable, right? So which means you have to segregate the meals between the compliant meal and the non-compliant meal, which means that if a meal has, I give you an example, 1,000 tons, but only 2 tons are non-compliant, that whole meal is gone. So you have to take out the non-compliant supply. That is the challenge that we all face.
Henrik, this question is back to you again. I think this has been raised at the joint task force meetings, but we've not had clarity on this. A participant here has raised it again in terms of fairness and level playing field. Why was there additional 10 products or derivatives included in Annex 1 for palm, but not for either soy or cattle from tallow? This mainly affects the oleochemical producers. Jeremy or
yeah, I think this is a question that may be better left for expert. I was not involved in the impact assessment myself, so I cannot say, and I have not seen the reply.
Okay, fine. But we do look forward to some replies from the Commission later on, because that has been a pressing problem, and many of the exporters have been waiting to get some replies to that. And furthermore, on the benchmarking process, there is a question here. There have been ongoing delays with the benchmarking process, and the consultant was only appointed in April. It has also been announced that the benchmarking will be delayed by at least 12 months. The country benchmarking system, for everyone's information, countries will be benchmarked either high, low, or medium risk. So the German Agriculture Ministry has also written to the Commission stating it will not support the implementation of the EUDR unless the benchmarking is complete. So how does the Commission intend to address these objections within the EU itself?
Well, first of all, the actual consequences for implementation of whether the benchmarking is in place or not are not that big. Because what happens is that until the benchmarking exercise is completed, everybody is at standard risk. So those who have feared to be high risk can take a breath because they are standard risk, and those who had hoped to be low risk will have to do the additional element of the due diligence, which is the only difference. They will have to provide information related to the risk assessment. And there is the opportunity for more, there will be more controls for standard risk areas than for low risk areas. So, but other than that, the due diligence process is the same. Everything that needs to be done is the same. So I think that this is not. The practical issues related to this are not so big. Secondly, there have not been any official announcement that it would be delayed by at least 12 months. As I said in my presentation, it is delayed, that is correct. We are taking time, the Commission is taking time to make sure that the assessments are done correctly, that the methodology is correct, and we will come out with more information as soon as possible. But there's no number. And indeed, there are some of our member states that have also had issues related to this. But the thing, yeah. So this has been discussed, but I don't think really there's any consequences coming out of that.
Okay. A question to Yong now. In a scenario where this is more of smallholders' impact, in a scenario where the smallholder attain land from the government for crop development after the deadline, some of the state lands that may be developed for agricultural purposes, EUDR strict requirements would eventually limit them from supplying to nearby mills. How would MSPO cater to this issue without affecting the smallholders' livelihood? Very important question, Yong, for MSPO.
Okay, I understand the worry about this, but currently what happened is that MSPO have been mandatory implemented the whole Malaysia. So what happened that we have roughly above 80% of the smallholder verify with MSPO. So we have known that a lot of smallholder in Malaysia are not a new development. A lot of smallholder in Malaysia have been developed since long ago. Maybe they have gone through 2 cycles. That's why we want to stress that smallholder oil palm smallholder in Malaysia can comply to EUDR because they have a developed area much longer before the cutoff of 31st December 2020. But okay, take the scenario example, if the smallholder just started the developing the land after the cutoff date 31st December 2020. So it happens that MSPO, if they are supplied with MSPO, we will have the data. So sorry to say, this smallholder will not be able to qualify for EUDR because of their requirement, because it's a regulation. But I believe not all Malaysian oil go to EU. Okay, I think only about 1.5 million tons of CPO going to EU. So others we can go to for so-called other local consumption or other places. So we talk about generally, okay, quite a lot of Malaysian smallholder are qualified for EUDR because this is not a new so-called industry for them. Palm oil have access for smallholder to evaluate, to help them in eradicating poverty after their livelihood. So, but if talk about cases, then you can say like that.
I just want to add the total palm oil that's exported to the EU is a large amount. It's about nearly 6 to 6.4 million tons palm and palm oil products, and all of them will be impacted. That's a huge quantity. So how do you ensure that all those products are EUDR compliant? It's a massive job, massive work to be done by the producers or even the exporters, you know. Yes, Ku, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think what Chiong is saying is correct in the sense that you can qualify your smallholder, but the issue is traceability. The smallholder sells to an aggregator, sells to a dealer that goes to the mill. We work backwards. We go from the mill to the dealer, and if the dealer does not provide you who the supplier is, no matter that your supplier is qualified, we can't qualify that mill because we don't know, right? So that's the issue. Now, if you are saying that you can segregate this whole supply chain to say that this part of the supply chain is going to you and this part is not, then you have to segregate the entire supply chain from the source. And I don't think that's possible.
Can I maybe just also add to what Yong and Mr. Koo said? But if any scheme right now has the fighting chance, it's MSPO because they have the dealer standard. So getting the dealers certified and getting them into the supply chain and getting them to report on their supplier information, I think would be one of the ways where we can ensure smallholder inclusivity. I think they're not, I don't know of any other scheme with dealer standards and ways to complete the supply chain. As Mr. Koo mentioned, once you have a dealer in the middle, then the link is broken because they don't give you the information that you need to trace back to the plot of land. So I think MSPO is in a very good position to include smallholders, and I think that's where we should really focus our effort moving forward.
Okay, but I think the question that we have, Jocelyn, is for all the work that has been done to improve MSPO to meet the EUDR requirements, the question we have from the smallholders, how are we going to be compensated? You know, what assurance do we have that after complying to all these requirements, there will not be more regulations coming out from the EU? If you take the past, it has been RED1, RED2, RED3, banning palm biodiesel. Then we have the corporate sustainability due diligence regulation. We have the forced labor regulation. We have EUDR. I can add a list to it. So the producers are worried. Would this mark the end of any regulations from the EU, or would they be expecting more? Because our cost to comply is definitely increasing. Yeah. But who is going to pay for the cost? Will the consumer pay for the cost? Will the importer pay for the cost? We don't know yet. So back to Henry, there's a question from the participant here. How is the coverage of product under EUDR chosen? Now the coverage is on palm, soya, timber, etc. Will there be expansion of the list of products to comply in the future? I think there was, I did hear the Commission say that that product list will be expanded. So how will the list be expanded? If deforestation is one of the concerns, will rapeseed and Oh, will rapeseed and sunflower oil be included in the list in the next phase?
So, indeed, it was the current commodities were selected based on an impact assessment, as I mentioned. So we were looking at the interface between commodities that are contributing on a global scale to deforestation and where the EU is a major importer. So again, we're not trying to regulate things that have no meaning for the EU. So even if there may be regions where most deforestation is related to cassava or to other products, they are not imported in big quantities to the EU. So therefore, we have no business in working on that. As the regulation says, over time, the situation may change so that other commodities will be more responsible for deforestation on a global scale. Hopefully, the commodities that are currently in the scope will no longer contribute to deforestation, but there may be other developments that we cannot yet foresee. Also, in the negotiation of the regulation itself, and in the impact assessment, we had, of course, looked at many other commodities to make sure that we had covered the whole scope. So if you followed the negotiations of the regulation, you will remember that in the first version, the Commission's version, there were only 6 commodities. Rubber was not included, but that happened in the negotiation process because there were other part of the legislative system that felt that this was already a big problem. So if other of the commodities that we have already looked at, we're currently looking already at possible next candidates, but also looking at other ecosystem other than forested land. So I mean, yes, we're looking at making sure that deforestation from commodities imported to the EU will continue to decline, not only from the ones that are currently in the scope, but also others that may be upcoming in the future.
I know that some of our speakers will need to leave soon, but Henry, a very quick question on NCR land. There is a concern here. Native custody right landowners do develop a lot on development projects from the government, such as oil palm, which in return provides infrastructure, job opportunities, and dividends for the leased land. Will there be any possibility to waive these new developments of native lands? Do you think there's a possibility there?
I would like to defer that question to either Josil or Jeremy, who have been working a lot on these issues.
Maybe I can start, Jeremy. I just wanted to also point out that these are not just EU laws that don't allow, but also MSPO have requirements and a cutoff date that would apply to similar development projects. Yeah, it is. It's probably also going to be, if they don't have MSPO certificate, or then they also won't comply to the legal requirements of the country of production. So I'm just going to point out that one. And Jeremy, you can add.
Yes, just my understanding is that it's really about whether there's deforestation after the cutoff date rather than who's involved. But there's not a requirement under the EUDR that those NCR don't do what they want to do. It's just that the product shouldn't be entering the EU market. And I know, as Ku was saying, that could involve problems in segregation in the supply chain, but that's what I understand. It's more about the deforestation and the user. And as Josil says, there's a cutoff date under the MSPO certification that predates the cutoff date under the EUDR. So I'm not sure how that. I think that's a work in progress. How to see how to accommodate the different needs from different stakeholders.
We have a total of 79 questions. I've tried to take as many questions as possible for the speakers, but we are unable to take them all. We'll see if there are some questions that do need replies. We will get the assistance of the speakers to do that. But before we wrap up, I'd like to give each one of the speaker a moment to share any final thoughts or any key takeaways. Please do keep your remarks very brief. We will start with Henrik first. Henrik?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for all the questions. And again, if somebody is typing them up, I would appreciate to receive them so that I can feed them to colleagues, because we are trying to continuously improve our FAQ work. So, and then I also just wanted to say that despite all these challenges that we have heard about, actually, I've been working on these issues now for 4 years here in the region, and I'm extremely optimistic regarding the preparedness of the countries. I see that there's a really serious willingness and work at the technical level to try to make this happen, and I see that there are already shifts going in a very good direction. So it's not all gloomy. I think it's very positive from my point of view as well.
Thank you, Henriette. Daphne?
Yes, there's two things. The first is that in her speech, Henriette refers to the different documents and that you actually only have to provide the sustainability statement and not so much the other thousands of documents. That is true. But in Article 9.2, it says that you, as an importer, you need to be able to share all the proof with the competent authorities whenever they request. Since we know there's at least 3% checks a year, we need to have all the documents in place in Europe. So is Wilmar Europe ready? Is this happening? Yes. Are we ready? Is Wilmar Europe ready? Needs to be seen, yes and no. Whether we have enough volumes, that's the big question.
Cool.
I think I would just say two things. One is micro and one is macro. On the micro front, I think it is very evident that the EU authorities are trying to get ready, but we're running out of time. And the trouble with that is when the EU authorities are not fully ready, it is very hard for us in the business to be ready because we are getting ready to a standard or an expectation that we cannot be certain about, right? So that's the micro level. And we only have this many months left. And when we say 1st of January or 31st of December, you got to work backward and discount 3 to 4 months because that's when the prep starts. When we get supplies coming in through the mills into the KCP, into the refinery, into the oleo, into the ship, into the Rotterdam port, it will take 3 to 4 months. So you got to discount that backwards. On the macro front, unfortunately, I think this is a development that is creating no incentives for businesses to invest in Europe. Whatever that we are invested in Europe, we will have to continue because European jobs are at stake and we're not about to abandon our employees there. But there is no incentive for any further investment in Europe, and that cannot be good for the European economy.
Who has got an important point to say? Europe is and is and will be an important market, but the question we have on our mind is making business expensive. It's an expensive business in Europe now. What do we do? Are we going to look at new markets? So let's go back to Jossel.
Okay, yeah, just sort of echoing what Henriette said, that it's very positive and working at the country level in Malaysia with MSPO, and there is a lot of commitment to upgrade the systems and to prepare the industry. And is it ready yet? No, I don't think everybody is completely ready, but there is a roadmap heading towards that direction, and hopefully the next time we present to you, we can also maybe show you upgrades that have taken place, and maybe that would calm the industry down. But on my side, just working at the national level, it's been very encouraging that the country is gearing up towards EUDR in spite of all the uncertainties that we hear today.
Yeah, definitely. No system is ever going to be 100% ready. I think I mentioned that. You will have to do improvements. You have to improvise it as you move along. And that's going to happen with MSPO. But I think there's a lot of upgrades that have been done to MSPO just to meet the EUDR requirements. So that's a huge step that has been taken by producers. Jeremy, can we hear from you?
I think I'll just make a short statement. I think we'll continue to work with MSPO as Dr. Jossel said on the requirements for the EU deforestation regulation in Malaysia, but also on ways that more smallholders can be included in the supply chain. So I think that's the challenge there, to increase smallholder inclusivity, and the MSPO is a basis upon which to do that. And also in the context of EFI and CAMI, we will continue to act in our role of trying to strengthen the dialogue between EU and Malaysia, and stand ready to try and increase this communication, which we feel is obviously extremely important. So thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And Yong? Final
From my side, MSPO, we have tried our best into develop a good standard for our power industry, and also with the fact that we are collaborating with EFI, we try to assist, try to so-called upgrade our system or anything that can assist in this matter. So as what mentioned by Ms. Bell, for MSPO side, we try our best to push forward the implementation date, including the upgrade of the MSPO trace, so that the power industry in Malaysia wouldn't be so-called left without anything for the EUDR requirement. That's all from me.
Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, let me thank everyone for joining us today. We appreciate your participation and engagement, especially a special thank you to our speakers. Henrik, thank you so much for taking time to take so many questions and provide all the necessary clarifications, although there are still a lot more questions on the minds of one of us, be it exporters, producers, or even the participants. But, all your expertise and your perspectives have been incredibly enriching. Thank you very much, everyone. Our Malaysian exporters and the EU operators have provided invaluable insights into the challenges, the constraints, some potential solutions they have also provided for meeting the EUDR requirements. So we urge the EU to address these roadblocks and bottlenecks urgently. We only have 5 months left, as compliance is only 6 months away. The Malaysian palm oil industry is definitely eager to collaborate with the EU to develop more solutions jointly. Thank you to the participants who submitted questions and proposed practical solutions. My apologies, we could not take all your questions. But before we conclude, I would like to inform you that the presentation slides will be available for download from the MPOC's website starting by this evening. Give us maybe another hour and all the presentations will be uploaded. We will also send a post-survey email to all the participants. Please share your feedback to help us improve our webinar content and organization. With that, thank you again, everyone, and wishing everyone a great day ahead. Thank you.